So I'm just looking at this information here on the Internet Archive, archive.org, and it is under, well, what the description is Canadian government gang stalking, and these are documents that pretty much, show that CSIS is clearly involved in this, and that they are involved in targeting people and putting them on these watch lists. Again, just more confirmation tonight of these activities happening to me, with the Ottawa police showing up as soon as I came out of the train station with virtually hardly anyone around there. 3 police cars, 2 of them leaving as soon as I arrived, and then 2 special constable cars also leaving at the moment I arrived, which corresponds with what is said in these documents, that they're told to do these things to let the quote-unquote target know that these things are happening. They want them to know that these things are happening as a means of intimidating them and trying to, because what they've done here is, obviously, you know this if you've looked into this at all, really what they're doing is falsely labeling people who have committed no crime as terrorists and putting them on these watch lists, despite the fact that these people have no criminal records, simply slandering them, using defamation of character, and lying to people who they enlist to partake in the harassment activities, and telling them that they're doing some sort of a good deed by doing this. It's entirely done through lies and manipulation, and CSIS is a completely corrupt organization run by some of the most grossly corrupt people imaginable. So let's look at the document here a little bit, and just to give some insight into how obvious it is with what they're saying here. So this document here was provided with the request for documents under Access to Information Act. And so it says it's in response to your request on February 13th, 2012 by the Security Intelligence Review Committee. You requested a copy of the Review Committee's report entitled Review of CSIS Use of Disruption to Counter National Security Threats, or what they refer to as national security threats, wrongly. So enclosed is a declassified copy of the requested document. Please note that some information in the attached records has been exempted under one or more of the sections. Okay, so let's move ahead here. So as you can see here, CSIS's use of disruption to counter national security threats. In other words, people who they've falsely labeled national security threats and lied about and slandered to put on these lists. So take a look at this here. So this review explores specific investigative activities by CSIS and the implications of these activities for the service. Whenever CSIS conducts investigations, an intended or unintended consequence can be to counter or disrupt a threat to national security. For instance, making it generally known to targets, and notice they refer to them as targets, that their activities are being investigated can reduce the likelihood that the targets will continue with their plans. Of course, what plans? Like, really? The service regards these methods to be in accordance with the CSIS Act. SIRC understands that countering or disrupting is part of investigating threats to national security and may at times be necessary to protect Canadians. Protect Canadians from what? People who are guilty of wrongthink? People who have committed no crime, who use slander unjustifiably and lie about and put on these watch lists to be harassed and stalked everywhere they go? Yeah, those people. So those are the people, and they again, look at the language here. They openly refer to, in the documents, they refer to them as targets. Interesting, huh? However, our review raises 4 issues with respect to the service's use of disruption that the committee believes require further consideration. First, disruption potentially overlaps with efforts already exercised by police agencies in Canada. Second, although CSIS's mandate under Section 12 does not explicitly prohibit the use of disruption, neither does the authority to collect and analyze intelligence and report and advise the Government of Canada thereon appear to capture such activities. Third, SIRC believes that ministerial knowledge of CSIS's use of disruption would be appropriate appropriate in certain circumstances. Fourth, there are no CSIS guidelines to help with the design of implementation of disruption operations or to prepare for the potential consequences of such investigative activity. And realistically, it's not investigative activity at all. It's overt harassment. The following study examines the service's use of disruption against a threat. Notice they refer to the people who they're targeting as a threat. People who they declare guilty of wrongthink or for various other reasons who they slander and put on these lists unjustifiably, despite the fact that these people have committed no crime and done nothing wrong. Section 3 examines the meaning of disruption, including why the service selected the measure. Section 4 revisits some cautionary arguments made by the MacDonald Commission of Inquiry that helped create CSIS as a civilian agency devoted to intelligence collection and dissemination. So moving along here, the service maintains that disruption is on a continuum of talking to people when investigating threats to national security and therefore is in accordance with the service's mandate. When asked about the possible negative consequences of disruption, CSIS responded that to mitigate community concerns, notice they refer to these as community concerns because they go to all the members of the community and slander the people who they are harassing in this way. So they wrongly refer to this as, of course, community concerns. We always accurately state that we are investigating threats to the security of Canada. Well, no, you don't. That's not accurate at all. What you're doing is lying about people who have done nothing wrong and abusing your position of authority to put them on these watch lists, to be harassed, slandered, and followed and stalked everywhere they go, and workplace mobbed, and all the other things, the sensitization tactics that go into this harassment program. So continuing, although SIRC understands that disruption is part of a continuum of the service's investigative activities, the committee is concerned with ensuring that proper guidance and accountability structures are in place to direct the service's use of this investigative activity. This is particularly relevant in today's complex threat environment in which there is an increasing convergence between the collection of intelligence and the enforcement of anti-terrorism laws. And when they say anti-terrorism, they're really just referring to these stalking and harassment activities that they do to people who have done nothing wrong and who they declare guilty of, maybe could be in some cases guilty of wrongthink, simply for stating opinions that they feel should not be disseminated, things of that nature. Or in some cases, these are people who are being put on these lists going back generations in their families, so that literally numerous members of the family going back could have done something to irritate one of these people in positions of authority, and then having entire families being put on these lists to be harassed and continually stalked going back generations. So that's another thing that comes into play here, and clearly they're lying about most of this, but they are admitting, as I said at the beginning, they're admitting that they're doing these things in a way that they want the target to see it. They want them to know that it's happening. And again, as what happened with me tonight, as soon as I arrived at the train station and came out, immediately you saw those police cars leaving, and then the special constables leaving right as I arrived. So again, letting you know that it's being done, because they want the targets of the harassment to know this. That's part of what makes it effective. Why is CSIS's use of disruption of concern? Oh, gee, I wonder why. SIRC's first concern is that disruption potentially duplicates actions that are already executed by law enforcement agencies. Since 9/11, there has been a general trend towards the adoption of an integrated national security framework as outlined in the government's national security policy. This policy underscores the importance of connectivity between threat assessments and communicating such information to first responders and law enforcement. Right, of course, because they take part in these operations, obviously. There's ample proof of that. Therefore, when the service engages in disruption without full coordination of the police, it is unclear if this is consistent with the emphasis of the government's national security policy, which is supposed to create a clear and effective approach to security among the various federal departments and agencies which have different responsibilities. Continuing on with this CSIS document here, concern over the phenomenon of mandate creep, quote unquote, is not new. Over a quarter of a century ago, the former RCMP security service believed that because prosecution could be applied only after offenses were committed, law enforcement was an inadequate means of effectively preventing acts of violence. So in other words, people who have done nothing wrong and committed no acts of violence, you can just arbitrarily say that you think they might based upon the opinions that they have or whatever. Ridiculous, but that's what they do. Continuing on, for this reason, the security service took upon itself the responsibility to be proactive and to develop threat countermeasures, i.e., making up lies and slandering people and enlisting all these members of the community to stalk and harass them, and having first responders stalk and harass them as well. The MacDonald Commission commented that the use of disruptive or countermeasures were potentially problematic for those involved in collection and analysis because the collection of information and its assessment and transformation into intelligence may be said to be part of the countering, i.e. disruption process, in the sense that without collection and assessment, nothing can be done. Although to describe collection and assessment as countering is to expand the definition of the term beyond its real limits. The service notes that all of its activities during the disruption campaign were conducted in accordance with its role of obtaining information on a threat, pointing out, however, the committee believes it is important to differentiate between coordination attempts and actually succeeding to work together on threat mitigation. So again, they're trying to claim that it's about investigating and things like that. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is just absolute falsehood here. But they're using this type of thing, this type of jargon, to justify these things that they're doing. Committee recognizes that CSIS is not solely responsible for this situation. Nonetheless, the very fact that it occurred is cause for concern. Third, SIRC found that the manager of public safety did not know of the service's efforts to engage in disruption to mitigate the threat posed, although the minister was informed of the threat in February and again in June the same year. In neither case was it made clear that CSIS intended to disrupt the alleged quote-unquote threat, which is probably just some person who was arbitrarily placed on this list despite committing no crime, who they consider guilty of wrongthink or something similar to that, or perhaps someone whose family members going generations back had done something to offend some Freemason or one of these frauds in these positions of authority, and then had been put on this list unjustifiably. The committee believes that if CSIS has determined that it is necessary to disrupt threats to national security, then government should be made aware of this. The issue goes to the heart of the ministerial, and it'll continue on the next page here. Sorry, I'm recording it with my phone. So. The committee believes that CSIS must take further steps to manage such activities and their outcomes in the future. And then summary of findings. SIRC found that the Minister of Public Safety did not know of the service's efforts to engage in disruption to mitigate the quote-unquote threat. Again, they're referring to the people who have been unjustifiably placed on these watch lists and declared terrorists despite having done nothing wrong. And in most cases, a lot of cases, people who they just declare guilty of wrongthink and of having opinions that they deem to be unacceptable. SIRC found that the service's use of disruption was undertaken in the absence of appropriate guidance, which I'm sure it was, and has been continuing to do. So there you have it. Again, they're basically admitting in these documents to these things that they're doing, and they're falsely claiming that it's in some way for national security, which is absolutely ridiculous. And they're admitting that the methods that they use are done so that the people who they refer to specifically as targets will know that it's happening. So they're doing it so these things so that the target will know that it's happening, of course, because that gives them a lot more power to try to sort of to intimidate and harass. And they aren't preventing anything with this. They are literally using this. They are misusing their authority, completely misusing their authority, and using lies and deceit and manipulation to conduct these operations. And it is criminal, and it is disgraceful, and it is inhumane. Just to mention this in conclusion, the reason CSIS won't openly admit to the people who they're targeting that they have been placed on these watch lists is because if they did that, that would give the person a chance to refute these things. That would give them a chance to defend themselves against the lies and slander that are used to put them on these lists. So that's why they can't confirm or deny who has been placed on these lists, and will not give the people who they are targeting with these harassment activities any ability to refute the lies and slander or to defend themselves against this defamation that they used to enlist all these people to partake in these activities. So that is key for them, because if they admitted that the person was on the list, that would give the person some type of ability to refute the lies and slander. So that's why they won't do that, and that's why they will neither confirm nor deny who has been placed specifically on these lists.